So, how does the Bradley Manning case compare with the case of another well-known leaker, and that is Edward Snowden?
Joining us tonight to offer some perspective is military law expert Gary Barthel. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Let's begin. 136 years. He got off on the biggest charge, but he could spend the rest of his life behind bars. What do you think will happen, and how does the military courts differ from civilian?
Well, the military courts differ from the civilian courts with regard to the sentencing phase of the trial, in that in the military, the sentencing phase of the trial is it's a bifurcated system. So the first system you have is the fact-finding system. That system has just been completed today. The next phase of the trial is going to be the sentencing phase. And during the sentencing phase, it's similar to the first phase. The prosecution will put on evidence as to aggravation, as to why, and argue that he should get the maximum punishment allowed by law. The defense will then have an opportunity to put on evidence of extenuation and mitigation, and they'll obviously argue that what he did here, he didn't mean to harm anybody, you know, his intent was innocent, and they'll play that theory to the court. Ultimately, though, the judge is going to make the decision. The military doesn't have sentencing guidelines like other courts do. The decision is going to be based just on the evidence that's presented at the sentencing phase. The judge can also consider the evidence that PFC Bradley Manning testified to when he pled guilty at the first phase. So the judge can consider those statements that he made during the first phase in the sentencing phase of the trial.
When citizens hear that secrets have been stolen and then dispersed, and the enemy might or might not get their hands on them, that's a very, you have a very guttural reaction to something like that. So when we get to the sentencing phase, now we have to decide how to punish this man for doing it. And it comes down to intent. Did he intend to harm the U.S.? Well, obviously with this verdict today, aiding the enemy, not guilty, at least the judge felt he didn't really intend to harm the U.S. He was simply trying to help the U.S. At least that's what some might argue, right?
Right. Well, with regard to the aiding the enemy charge, which the court found him not guilty of, I think the court was hung up and found that the government failed to show that he knew that the information that he was releasing was going to end up in the enemy's hands. So that aspect of the knowledge element wasn't proven by the government.
That saved his life in a lot of ways.
It kept him from getting a life sentence.
Exactly.
But with regard to some of the other charges that he was found guilty of, there was a certain knowledge aspect to it, that he knew that this information that he was accessing and that he was disseminating could potentially end up in the hands of somebody who shouldn't have it.
So this is the second WikiLeaks case. Of course, Edward Snowden is still roaming around a Moscow airport, staying away, because this clearly would have been his fate as well. Why are these cases so important, and how are they both similar?
Well, I think they're both important in that you have people who have access to confidential and oftentimes top secret information that is meant to protect the American public and the American war effort. And you have people who have access to that information who, for whatever reason, are accessing it and giving it to other people based on a personal feeling that they have that, hey, the war is wrong or whatever.
A philosophy of some kind.
Personal philosophy. In this case, it just seems that there were avenues. If somebody has a personal issue with the way the war effort's going, or some war crimes are being committed, or whatever the case may be, there's a system in place where they can go and vent those concerns out, either through the command or through whatever government agency they work with.
Without spilling the secrets out to the whole world on the internet.
Without taking the issue into their own hands and doing what they will with it.
All right. Well, I appreciate you coming in. This is it's complicated, but we're going to hear more about Snowden and certainly more about Bradley Manning as well. We appreciate you coming in.
Thank you.
Gary Barthel, thanks so much.
Thank you.